Hey everybody, how you doing? Let's talk about the new moon in Pisces, which is coming up in a few days' time. I'll show you the chart and we'll have a look at a few things. I think I just want to start off by saying that I think this full moon, new moon is probably one of the most important new moons of the year. And I don't say that lightly because it's in Pisces, right? Which is that within itself is quite an odd thing because Pisces is the last sign of the zodiac and a new moon is an Aries energy. So I've always found that kind of new moon to be really bizarre within itself. Then we have Neptune in Pisces towards the end of Pisces. And so we're never going to have another new moon in Pisces or the sun in Pisces with Neptune in Pisces in our lifetime ever again. So that is clear that shows us there's something very, very powerful about closure. I could just end the video right now, to be quite frank. It's as simple as that, yet it's extremely complicated because it will manifest or play out differently for the collective and for all of us individually in different ways, right? So there are a few features that I want to point to. So I'm not going to end the video now, but I'm just really making a point that we are talking about a new moon in Pisces that we'll never have again in our lifetime with Neptune in Pisces. Saturn, who's also in Pisces in the tropical zodiac, recently went invisible, and that was my last video. Audio, whatever it was. And just one thing I'd like to bring up about that as well. In the Southern Hemisphere, Saturn becomes visible again at the end of March. But in the Northern Hemisphere, which is where most of you are that watch me, Saturn does not become visible until around the 21st, 22nd of April. So just keep that in mind because Saturn's invisibility at this time, especially around this new moon as well, is highly, highly crucial from the point of view of what we are completing and finishing. And I've been reflecting on this a lot. And again, the North Node is in Pisces as well. So it's a strange kind of energy because there's this sense of, and please tell me if you relate to this, there's this incredible sense of a lot of things really coming to a completion, collectively and in our lives individually as well. And yet there's this sense of we're trying to get a sense of clarity or vision, or knowing, how the future looks, but it's a little bit blurry still, because Pisces it's a water sign, right? And it's at the end of the wheel, and it typically speaks to completions, things ending. Of course, it's connected to dreams and visions and, psychic experiences and things like that. And I think during this time, while Neptune is completing, the journey in Pisces, and the North Node's in Pisces, and the new moon's in Pisces, and Saturn's in Pisces, and at the moment Mercury's in Pisces. Venus has been through Pisces. She's going to come back through Pisces. She's going to go retrograde in about a week or so. I'm going to come back talk about that retrograde journey and her rebirth as the Venus morning star. But there's a lot happening. There's a large stellium, of planets in Pisces. Inevitably, when you have so many planets in Pisces, particularly, Neptune is one of the rulers. It's a modern ruler, to Pisces. Jupiter is a traditional ruler, but nevertheless, it is a planet that is mostly associated to rulership to the sign of Pisces. And if you work with evolutionary astrology, you'll just go straight to Neptune anyway. And Neptune is the trickiest, most difficult archetype out of all of them. And I tell you this through personal experience and through observation and correlation of decades of having watched what Neptune does. And, it doesn't matter how much we think we know, how much we might prepare ourselves when it comes to Neptune transits. There is always something that we can be blindsided by, and that's a fact. It's not a personal opinion, it's just a fact. So when you put all that together, there is something really, you know, just really powerful coming to a close, And I was reflecting on this myself just the other day. I was thinking about this is very much Pluto in my ascendant. I've got my second retrograde moon moving through my 12th house. And I was thinking about endings, things that I've ended in my life, things that I've completed. And a lot of that had to do with certain relationships, friendships, just people in my life that have been part of the story of my journey, that have showed up to show me something that I've needed to see. And, in a lot of cases, it's been difficult and it's been shitty. And, there's been a huge disappointment and all of those things. And I had this moment. It was kind of like lucid dreaming, if you like, where I was, it's very Pluto. I was visualizing kind of all these experiences that I'd had where I'd been, really hurt or really disappointed by certain individuals, let's say. And all I felt was this, there was this darkness there. They were like black skulls. Sounds pretty dark, I know, but it is what it is. So there was like these black skulls just hanging off me, right? And I just felt this, I felt like I was watching myself, like it was like an out of body experience, and I was watching myself still holding on to these vibrations, these entities that are no longer present in my life. And that got me thinking about the notion of forgiveness again. And it got me thinking about the notion of just letting things go and just how difficult actually that is for us. People just say to you, get over it, let it go, move on, move forward, and so on and so forth. Um, but I think there is a timing and a process for each of us when it comes to those sorts of things of forgiving and letting go and releasing and so forth. It's not a mental thing. You can't just fucking sit there and say, "Oh yeah, yeah, I've let that go." It's a somatic, a heart, a soul, and a mind thing. It has to come all together where you truly you really mean it, you really feel it and mean it and release it, right? In such a way that's not just a mental dialogue in your mind. That doesn't work. I'm sure you will all agree with that. How many times have you said to yourself, I'm not going to think about that again. I'm not going to think about that person again. I'm going to let that go. And how many times has that person or that situation or that experience pop back up in your mind again, or something's happened that's triggered the pain of that memory? It's not as easy as people think. People talk so much about this journey of transformation and doing shadow work and, healing and so forth. And it's become, such a talk thing, for decades now. It's just this talk, 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 talk. But the words, whilst they are very, very powerful, they don't mean anything if there's no alignment with the words, with your actions, and with what you are feeling. It has to be this alignment with all of those together. And again, this is relevant to the topic of the new moon in Pisces because this is about lots of things coming to a complete closure. Things that are probably so unconscious in us as well. It can be very tricky to pinpoint certain things. And then on the other hand, there'll be certain things that you'll be very clear about that you are really just ready to move away from. Let me just bring up the chart because that will prompt my memory with some other things that I wanted to point to relative to this new moon, some of the aspects and so forth. So it's quite interesting because here it is here and it's conjunct Ceres. Now, I can tell you hands down, with personal experience, Ceres is a very, very difficult archetype. It's one of those archetypes that it's a very Pluto type of energy. Yes, there is this potential for renewal and transformation, but not without going through some death process. Now, whether that's a death of something or someone or a situation or a deep a deep purging emotional process that you might need to go through. And we're talking Pisces, we're talking water, we're talking sensitivity, we're talking things coming to an end, we're talking, the end of the wheel, completion, closure, for rebirths to start. So this is a very strange new moon, one that we'll never have again in our lifetime. So it is an opportunity from that perspective to really try to um, actually trying to do something with it is probably not even the right way to put it. It's more about um, allowing, I think, it's more about really just allowing things to come through in whichever way they come through without trying to control the narrative, without trying to control the circumstances and the details and the situation, right? Which is very much the North Node in Pisces anyway. The South Node in Virgo is letting us know that, you know, having having a really judgmental and critical perspective on things, and having very little compassion is not going to serve us moving forward for the next 18 months with this nodal axis. We really need to lean into this North Node in Pisces. And I think it's no freaking coincidence, because nothing is a coincidence. The word coincidence, when you break that down, it's two words, coincide. So it's things lining up in a very particular way at a very particular time for a very particular purpose. So to have the North Node in Pisces, whilst we're having this new moon in Pisces, Neptune finishing the journey in Pisces, we need to close certain chapters. And sometimes the most powerful way to be able to close certain things is to find the ability to forgive. Because when we're not able to forgive, the implication is that we are still angry or still hurting so much that compassion and forgiveness is very far away. So the North Node is in Pisces, I think, to actually help us through this massive, massive portal of closure that's happening, both collectively and, of course, individually. Collectively, it's so freaking obvious. It's been obvious for the last probably 4 or 5 years how much the world was coming to um, just a complete change. The world that we see today resembles nothing, nothing of what was even a decade ago. Nothing. It's like we are living like on some other planet. Personally, I prefer the old world, but that's the thing about this thing called energy, life, consciousness. It doesn't remain still. It doesn't remain stagnant. It is always changing in form, right? That's consciousness, energy. It can never be destroyed, but it can only change in form, right? That's the soul coming in, having various experiences for various lengths of time at various points through its cycle. And it'll meet certain things, it'll complete certain things, and there'll be many things that we cannot do or cannot complete. So we will come back to re-meet them. But in that process of our coming in and going out, coming in and going out, there's another massive transformation that's happening with the earth itself, right? And with the events on the earth, which we term history. So there's these two kind of fields, if you like, going on. There's the collective field of change and growth and evolution, and then there's our own personal growth and evolution. And somehow we need to find a way to line that up together. It's not always easy, that's for sure. So look at this new moon. It's conjunct Ceres. I think that says to us that there might be a sadness here, of certain things that we've realized, that we just need to let them die. We cannot hold on to them anymore. Sometimes that can be a good thing, and sometimes that can be a really painful thing. And that's the that's the nature of Pisces Neptune 12th house. It very much corresponds to ecstasy and agony. You know, it's two faces of the same coin. It's like 3 weeks ago when I was on this massive high where I had this blissed out experience for about 7 days nonstop and I couldn't come down. You know, it was just, I hadn't been so happy in years, particularly since my father's transcendence, you know. I hadn't felt so much joy. And it just reminded me that, you know, joy is still there. But, you know, I think when it comes to grief, uh, it's a very personal experience, and there is some grief that I believe that we'll always kind of have with us. And then there'll be moments that come through where we can put aside that grief to experience some bliss and some joy again. It doesn't erase the grief. It really doesn't. Because, you know, I can tell you now, 3 weeks later, after that high, which is Pisces ecstasy, bliss, right? I then had this dream of my dad, and it's a long story relative to the whole dream process with me and my dad. But let me put it like this. For the first few years, I was dreaming about him multiple times per night. Very vivid dreams, so many different dreams. And then the last probably 3 years, I haven't been seeing him much at all. And that's been worrying me. But what I noticed a pattern. I noticed that when I see him, the pain of the grief that I feel is just it opens up like a complete explosion, and I don't know what to do with it. And it jolts me in ways that I couldn't even begin to describe to you. So there's an example of 3 weeks ago, I was on bliss, ecstasy, you know, then I had that dream and I just went into my complete grief. And that's life overall, whether it's I'm just using these narratives from my personal experience to describe what Pisces energy is about. And every time I've had dreams about my dad, and I kid you not, Neptune and Venus are always together and always in the 12th house, because when I have these dreams, I usually wake up from them because the pain is so intense. My body's just jolted out of the dream. And I look at my time and I put up a chart, and it's always Venus, Neptune in the 12th house, which just describes so much about me and my dad. So again, you know, with this new moon, with Ceres there, I think there's a lot to consider relative to um, some painful things might come up, you know, that we just need to let them move through. You can't stop it. You can't stop the pain. You can't fucking bypass it. If you try to stop it, you are suppressing it and blocking it. If you try to bypass it, you're suppressing it and blocking it again. These feelings, they need room to move. Sometimes they need a voice, sometimes they need complete silence, sometimes they need some tenderness, sometimes we're just completely alone in it, sometimes we may have support. You know, it depends, right? And we just need to find the best way that we can to work through whatever it is that's showing up. But what I'm saying is that with Pisces especially, and a Pisces new moon conjunct Ceres, and then Neptune's right at the end there in Pisces, something massive finishing, lots of things finishing actually. And because the North Node is there in Pisces, it's saying to us, there's going to have to be some real compassion, even towards ourselves, perhaps, but certainly towards situations we've experienced, right, that we haven't really been happy about, that we didn't like, that weren't very joyful. That's why the North Node is in Pisces at this time, because it's showing us this is the key to actually working through these endings. We can't, for the most part, if we are to truly try to release and let certain things finish, I think that the best way we can do it is with the North Node in Pisces. That is to have more compassion, um, to forgive and to have more faith in what we can't see coming because we can't see things coming. We like to think we can. And yes, as astrologers, we might have certain so-called predictions. I don't like to use the word prediction, even though I may do a forecast reading. When someone comes to me, I call it a forecast versus a prediction, because the only one that can really predict is God. We can get a glimpse and we can get a lot of insight and a lot of understanding and a lot of awareness, and that can really help us. But anything can happen just like that at any moment that we were, not aware of at all. And if someone is really authentic in this sacred science called astrology, they will admit that versus, just sitting there saying that they have all the answers and this is exactly what's going to happen and there's no two ways about it. If you hear somebody speaking like that, frankly speaking, that's alarm bells because that's just pure arrogance. The other interesting thing is that Jupiter is squaring this new moon. And that's cool. That's okay because Jupiter actually rules the new moon. And Jupiter is a benefic. Yes, it's not in the greatest shape from the point of view of sign, it's in its detriment here. But look, Jupiter in detriment is not overly, you know, it's not as difficult as, a malefic planet might be, in detrimental fall, such as Mars or Saturn, for instance. The other thing that I think that's really interesting about this Jupiter squaring this new moon is that I've mentioned this before. Some of you may know, some of you may don't. Every planet has a nodal axis, just as we just look at the moon's nodes, right? Here they are here in Virgo Pisces. Pretty much everyone's familiar with those. But every other planet has nodes as well. The north node of Uranus is at 11 degrees of Gemini. That is for all of us because these the nodes for the later planets, they're pretty much in the same signs for all of us because they move so slowly, right? So the north node for Uranus is in Gemini, and this at 11 degrees, and Jupiter is at 12 degrees. So it's already been past, the 11th degree. But the point being that that north node to Uranus is right there with this Jupiter squaring the new moon. And I was kind of feeling into that and thinking, what might that be? And obviously, but typically the first thing that comes up when we're trying to analyze something is the mental stream, of keywords and themes and ideas, that correlate to these archetypes. But we won't fucking know until it happens. And especially it is Uranus, the north node of Uranus, and Uranus is the unpredictable. But I guess, at its greatest potential spectrum end, it would be, I guess, something that might be beneficial in helping us free ourselves up, from something that's been very difficult or something that we've been unable to detach from. Detachment is a great word for Uranus and Aquarius for that matter, but particularly for Uranus. Uranus helps us detach and be a lot more objective, right, versus being subjective. When we are, immersed, self-absorbed, completely subjective, our actual perspective is pretty screwed up on everything. And that's not a wrong thing or a bad thing. It's just how it is. So when we can step out of anything, especially our self perspective, and we bring in objectivity and detachment, it separates us, right? Creates this distance. So it enables us to have a greater sense of perspective. It allows us to have a greater sense of awareness. That's why oppositions are very powerful because that's exactly what they do in their greatest potential. So Jupiter is square the new moon. Jupiter itself squaring the new moon, I don't see that as a problem. And I think actually Uranus's north node being there might just be a sudden breakthrough of some kind from this perspective of the stories, the narratives relative to things closing and being able to finally free ourselves from certain things that maybe have kept us in shackles emotionally, spiritually, psychologically, whatever it is, right? For each of us, it's different things. And because Saturn, is invisible, as I've said before many times, when a planet goes invisible, that planet, basically what it means is that planet is dying. There's a death process going on, goes into the underworld. As soon as a planet is not visible in the sky, it's dipped into the underworld. So it's not connected to the material world anymore. It's doing a massive purification, purging in the underworld. And this is Saturn we're talking about, which is a weird concept within itself because Saturn is the planet that corresponds the most to this reality. But Saturn too does go through that process. And because Saturn corresponds to either severing, uh, time, Chronos is the Lord of Time, Saturn, Chronos, Lord of Time, karma, finishing, completing, in the last sign of the wheel, tropical zodiac, finishing, closing things off. And it's dipping into the underworld so that it's actually quite a gift, at least from a spiritual perspective and at least from a karmic perspective of what we're needing to really finish at this point in our life. So Saturn going into the underworld can really assist us in that process. But relative to all Saturnian things from that real consensus reality, like if you're trying to deal with law, government, systems, and so on and so forth, while Saturn is invisible, it's going to be very difficult. If you have those matters going on and you have an opportunity to delay them, that would be my suggestion, because you're trying to navigate systems while Saturn is invisible. There's going to be some mismatch there. There's not going to be an open channel to be able to, to deal with those matters as they need to be dealt with. So Saturn going invisible can be difficult from those systemic kind of matters and issues. But relative to our spiritual karma, if you like, it's very, very powerful. And this new moon is just part of that process, actually, really, frankly speaking. Let me just see, was there anything else? Venus does not disappear at all in the Northern Hemisphere, in most places, which is super important and super powerful for you guys living in the Northern Hemisphere. And I will come back to speak to that because normally Venus does disappear, when she transitions from evening star to morning star or morning star to evening star. On occasions, she doesn't disappear, and that's supposed to be a really great omen when she doesn't. But again, I will come back and speak to that separately. Just one final thing, the goddess Cassandra is very closely conjunct this new moon. Now, sometimes these asteroid goddesses, when they are conjunct a new moon or a full moon, they can be quite palpable, their energy, quite telling. And sometimes it can be very mysterious and really subtle and not very obvious at all. But just for those of you that are not aware, Cassandra was a priestess of prophecy, actually. Well, Apollo, the sun god Apollo, gifted her with the gift of prophecy because he's the god of prophecy. But the story goes that he was in love with her and she rejected him. And so he cursed her. Um, he wanted to take away her prophetic gifts that he gave her, and he cursed her with a curse where she just, when she prophesies things, nobody would believe her. So keep that in mind because Cassandra is conjunct this new moon, and you may just find yourself in a situation where you are telling the truth about something and you are not being believed. And that can be a pretty fucking bad thing if it's something that's really huge. I'm not talking about white little lies and just, BS, Gemini BS on the internet. I'm talking about things that can harm people's integrity, status, uh, life, you know. So just be aware of that because that's a possibility when Cassandra is near a new moon or a full moon. Um, I'll be very interested to see how that this cycle unfolds. And for those of you that are listening to this, obviously you can't comment on that now when you watch this video because we need to see this is a new moon, so we need to see it unfold, over the course of the next few weeks, right? Until the next new moon. So let's see what happens. We might find that there'll be, somebody famous in the media that's, either trying to speak a truth and, they've just been slammed. What's that terminology they use nowadays? Shadowed out, or I've just forgotten the exact term. But anyway, let's see what that brings up. Okay, so I'm going to leave it here for now, and hopefully some of these ideas uh, resonate with you and are helpful. Look at this, Mars is direct here. Thank fuck. Sorry for the F word, guys. Sometimes it's just there's no other word, really. There just isn't. One might argue, well, there are many words. Yeah, but I actually love that word, especially when you're talking about Mars, because we know this Mars retrograde in Cancer has been a freaking nightmare for a lot of people. And I can tell you 100%, so many people have found this cycle particularly difficult, square Chiron opposite Mars, that's really, really challenging energies. But anyway, Mars is direct here, so that's fantastic. Pretty much everything's direct. Let's have a quick look, see. Um, just, yeah, look at that. Everything is direct at this point. So there's tremendous energy, pushing forward. When planets are moving direct, the energy is naturally, organically, whatever term you want to use, just flowing forward, for better or for worse, right? It's just flowing forward. So hang on, where's Venus? Yeah, she's not retrograde there. So this is a few days before Venus goes retrograde because she goes retrograde about 5 days after this new moon. So at this point, everything's moving direct, which I think, even that within itself is a part of the story from the point of view of uh, really enabling us to work with this energy, with not much not much sort of holding us back or getting in our way because everything's just naturally moving forward. But Saturn is invisible, keep that in mind. And that is huge on a karmic level, I assure you. And I'm sure there's going to be so many people that will think about this, maybe not now, and maybe not even at the end of this new moon cycle, but later on this year. And you'll remember these words that I've spoken about Saturn being invisible and the fact that this new moon in Pisces is the last one we have with Neptune in Pisces. It's the last time the sun is going to be in Pisces with Neptune in Pisces. This is just complete classic karmic ending closure. Pretty simple. Okay, I'll see you guys soon.